Well, I can't speak for my grandfather, who was a foundation senator and played a role in Federation discussions. And he was a foundation senator for the first 14 years of the Commonwealth's life. He came from Canada, from Pictou County, which was then a very impoverished province of Canada, and had arrived in Australia, I think in the middle 1800s, at the ages of 18 and 19. I always thought that politics, I suppose, would fit in alongside being a farmer. It was, you know, there were a lot of people who were farmers who were also politicians at the time, and always had been in Australia. When I did become a politician, I soon learned that it didn't fit in with being a farming. It was much more than a full-time job. But then the die was cast. I think I'd always been interested because I studied philosophy, politics and economics at university. But I don't think there's one particular thing that influenced me, one particular family thing. The fact that my grandfather had been a senator. My father was interested in public policy but never participated in the political process. So, you know, there wasn't a family whip out there. The most important thing is to treat people with respect, to treat people on their own terms, to stop making decisions in Canberra, and then describe consultation. I was in the Kimberleys last August, principally because I wanted to photograph Bradshaw paintings, but I also had discussions with some Aboriginal leaders. And I said, you know, how are relations with the government? Oh, not changed all that much. They're making a point of saying they discuss things with you. Yes, discussion's the same. But discussion was Canberra deciding what was good for Aboriginals, and the discussion was persuading Aboriginals to accept it. And that's not discussion. It's not giving them a sense of ownership, of participation. It's not treating with respect. And I would desperately like to think that the government's programs are working, but I believe that in too many areas there's a great question mark about that. Treating with respect and genuinely discussing, developing policy in cooperation with Aboriginals. Now, you can't find half a dozen Aboriginals and do this for people all over the country. Unfortunately, you're going to have to do it on the fairly local level and build up a base, because there are differences between Aboriginals in the Kimberleys, Aboriginal in the Territories and other places. And so the discussion has to be related to people of a particular locality. And that's where I think governments have to start. Well, it should evolve further. And, you know, there have been people who don't want to use the word, who want to pretend that Australia is not a multicultural country. Well, I suggest you only have to walk in the streets of Melbourne or Sydney to know that it is, and that if you were going to try and stop it being a multicultural country, you'd have massive... Well, it's just not possible. We already are. The facts are on the ground. A lot of people have come from different places and have made Australia their home, and I believe they've made Australia a much better place as a consequence. So it can't be turned back. I do believe that we need a new version of the Galbraith report into post-arrival services for migrants, which was, what he did was relevant to the middle 70s. Now, very different problems with people now, many more decades later. But to know how new arrivals are seeing Australia, what problems they see, what problems they face, what role do governments have in trying to make that easier, I think it would be useful to have that sort of examination again.
What was your reaction to the crime of race riots?
Sadness. I believe the talkback radio programs in Sydney have a very great responsibility. To some extent, I believe they incited what happened, and I think that's an absolute disgrace. At the time when there were, a lot of people almost invading the area, I think those who had been responsible for the original offence, to put it that way, or offences, were already in detention. And I didn't like the way the government handled it. At one point the government was saying, well, they're not going to criticise people who are proud of the Australian flag. Well, the Australian flag can be misused, and if it's being misused in the terms of race, it needs to be exposed. A journalist at one point rang me up and started to ask me questions, and I think wanted to say, well, your government had let Lebanese in, so you're responsible. And I said, well, what's the record of the Lebanese who came in at that time? Is their criminal record worse than that of other Australians? And they said they had done some work and had not found it to be so. Well, how then Lebanese kids who born in Australia, educated, brought up in Australia, how do they feel, to be not part of Australia? Is it the problem of their parents, who, as you said, not behave badly? Is it the problem of the schools, who have not behaved appropriately, perhaps? Or of their local communities, or of their local government? Have you got any idea what caused people to form themselves into a gang of this kind? And in any case, amongst young Australians, there are fortunately, gangs of different kinds. Old-fashioned Australians behave in this way sometimes. And trying to lay it on the grounds of race, I think is probably quite wrong. Look at the problems, look at the causes.